Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm back inside the Beltway, and I'm so glad to be here on this day, the first day of the Great American Shutdown. I'm very grateful to Kurt Schlichter, Bob Franz, who sat in for me last week as the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I took a long scheduled vacation on the island of Kauai, where it's a different world than the mainland of America because there are perhaps 2 cases of the virus on the islands total, and people are just mahalo. But, of course, I followed the news closely, tweeted occasionally, read obsessively, flew on Friday back to California, checked in there with family, dropped off the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, didn't want her to come to the Beltway because I don't know how much I'll be working. I might be working around the clock on this. And so she is staying West Coast, and I've come back to the Beltway. So I should be down to the pistachio nuts in about a week. I will go shopping later today, and it will be a little bit nuts, but I'm here to tell you, we were with you during the Florida recount every day. We were with you on the worst day of my broadcast career, 9/11, for 8 hours. We were here for the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. We were here throughout the surge. We were here during the election of 2008, which followed a financial panic as dramatic as any our country has endured since the Depression. We've been here during H1N1, during Ebola, through the 2016 campaign, and we're going to continue to do, I'm going to do what I've always done. Calm, focused, factual broadcasting. The voice of reason in the West was my original moniker back when I began broadcasting in 1999, the voice of reason inside the Beltway, and I'm glad you're here. We are all together, every single American, and indeed everyone in the world, confronting a serious, but not a calamitous situation. On an individual basis, it will be calamitous. 50 people have already died, and more will die in the United States, as well as more than 3,000 worldwide. But it is not Ebola. It is not the 1918 flu, which attacked young adults with a ferocity which we can only thank God is not occurring now. So I thought I would start today by reading you an article that came out last night in the Times of Israel. And it's one of those articles that I think everyone should read. Israeli virologist urges world leaders to calm public and slams unnecessary panic. It begins. A leading Israeli virologist on Sunday urged world leaders to calm their citizens about the coronavirus pandemic, saying people were being whipped into unnecessary panic. Professor Jihad Bishara, the director of the infectious disease unit at Petah Tikva's Beilinson Hospital, said that some of the steps being taken in Israel and abroad were very important, but the virus is not airborne. Most people who are infected will recover without even knowing they were sick. The at-risk groups are now known, and the global panic is unnecessary and exaggerated. Quote, I've been in this business for 30 years, Bishara said in a Channel 12 interview. I've been through MERS, SARS, Ebola, the first Gulf War, and the second, and I don't recall anything like this. There's unnecessary, exaggerated panic. We have to calm people down. People are thinking that there's a kind of virus. It's in the air. It's going to attack every one of us, and whoever attacked is going to die. He said that's not the way it is at all. It's not in the air. Not everyone who is infected dies. Most of them will get better and won't even know they were sick or will have a bit of mucus. But in Israel and around the world, quote, everybody's whipping everybody else up into panic. The leaders via the media and the wider public, who then in turn start to stress out the leaders. We've entered a vicious cycle. The doctor urged the public to internalize that, quote, we're talking about a virus that is not airborne, not airborne. Infection is via droplet transmission. Only if you are close to someone who has the virus and you get the saliva when he sneezes or coughs can you get ill. And if you don't if you don't maintain personal hygiene, primarily by washing hands. He said the virus did not appear to be, quote, too intelligent, unlike flu, quote, which is very intelligent. It changes, adapts, and infects people via their airway passages. Bishara said some of the harsh steps taken in Israel, which has essentially closed its border, limited its gatherings to no more than 10 people, closed all educational facilities, shut down malls, restaurants, and places of entertainment and culture, were motivated by leaders' acknowledged awareness that the Israeli health system will buckle under any further strain. Home quarantine has been ordered for everyone else who has passed someone who may have been infected by somebody else, he protested, because they know our health system cannot withstand coming under any more strain because we are perennially stretched to the limit. Referring to Israel's national lockdown, the doctor, the virologist, said, quarantine's an effective precaution, but there has to be temperate use. You can shut down a whole country, but there are other means. At this stage, he said, quote, we know how the virus behaves, how it spreads, which groups are in danger. We know how this virus is primarily dangerous to old people and to people with a history of chronic disease and those who are immunocompromised. According to Israeli leaders, quote, who are appearing every night at 8 p.m. to announce all kinds of steps, and some of them very important, he said, they should, quote, first and foremost, calm people down. That's my view. A serious but not calamitous situation that each and every one of us can help the country get through. And I especially think Congress has a job to do. I believe that they've got to do two things. By the way, we're going to be talking with the foreign minister of Taiwan this morning, Minister Joseph Wu, about how Taiwan, which is next door to mainland China, has had a handful of cases. What did they do? How did they stop it? How did their people cooperate in keeping it at bay? And hopefully we can learn from South Korea as well, which has broken the back of its curve quickly. I think we're going to do the same thing. I noted yesterday as I flew coast to coast that 2/3 of the airplane was empty. And that's consistent with this morning's news that United Airlines cut 50% of its flights. I mean, you can't run an airplane with 1/3 of the seats. There will just be a lot less mobility, but people will still be able to go everywhere. And I know a lot of places like New York are shutting down bars, and Mike DeWine in Ohio is doing an admirable job trying to break the back of it locally. And I believe everybody's on top of this. And I'm not going to get on here and slam Democrats, and I am so disappointed in people on media who have done nothing but turn this into a political football. I think President Trump deserves great credit for closing the borders with China early. I'm just going to say it a few times, I'm sure. All throughout January, I was talking about two things, just two things. I wish I had been right about Bernie Sanders and wrong about the virus. Turns out I was wrong about Bernie Sanders and absolutely right about the virus. Dwayne was telling me I was overdoing it about the virus. Because early alarms matter, and I'm glad the president took the early step. I love the task force. I watch every minute of every task force broadcast I can. I think the vice president's doing a great job. I don't see any upside in smashing Nancy Pelosi or knocking around the House bill. I think it's flawed, but they can work together to fix it. There are two things that need to be done. You need to do relief for the people affected, and you need a massive fiscal stimulus. My view, the best fiscal stimulus is stimulus that leaves something behind at the end, not the 2008, 2009 stimulus when it was all done. Remember shovel ready? There was nothing to show for it except for some repaved roads. Money vanished. I would buy every ship that you can order. I would keep the F-18s flowing, even though they're a fourth-generation plane, not a fifth-generation plane. I would up production of the F-35s. I would resupply every readiness category the Pentagon has. I would buy helicopters out the wazoo. I would use the Department of Defense because then at least you are getting something for your money. I'd stroke a check over to DOD and say, you know those Columbia submarines you want? Here's the $8 billion you need per submarine. Now, the Fed has cut interest rates to zero. They're doing repurchases. They're doing everything that Ben Bernanke invented, and that's good. And the Congress will do a stimulus, and that'll be fine. But this is basically a 6 to 8 week problem, I pray. And jolts of money, hosing down the country with money, is what the Congress needs to do. Not with bureaucracy, not with complex tax formulas, but with money. I'm going to come right back. I'd love to hear how you feel. 1-800-520-1234. Again, I am thankful to Dwayne and Adam and Ben for holding down the fort with Kurt Schlichter and Bob Franz, but I'm so glad to be back with you. Calm, fact-based, always focused here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the ReliefFactor.com studio inside the Beltway. Ivan Alosha, one song away. We're doing pandemic bumpers today. David in North Carolina, join me for a second. You're the first call of the Great American Shutdown. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Hugh. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind this
back.
morning? I just wanted to talk to someone out there in the great beyond who had to go through a week of ramping up and now living the Great American Shutdown in North Carolina.
Yeah. First of all, I have a job that I work outside of. I work from home, but I also have contact with the public, and we are out of the field for about 3 weeks, and it's not in an office, so we're shut down. My question to you is, do you think any of this would be happening if Obama were president? And I'm not just being a whiny Republican talking about whatism. I think we have an actual case study of it. It was either the swine flu or the bird flu when Obama was president, and from what I remember, it was more lethal than what we have going on right now.
Well, I'm glad you asked the question, David. I have been doing some studying, and H1N1 was pretty lethal. It's not potentially as lethal as this is. And I want to tell people the statistics. I have seen estimates from Chancellor Merkel and others that up to 70% of Germany will get the virus. So I assume that in America, maybe up to 70% will get it. 99% of the people who get it will recover completely, and I think a majority of them won't even know they've got it. And so it's not a calamitous event except for that 1%, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, from who it will be a mortality event. Those people are among the super elderly, especially the fragile elderly. They're saying 60 and above, but I think it's really 70 and above. And I myself not too worried about going out, but I'm going to self-quarantine. I'm going to stay home as much as I possibly can. I'll go to the market. You know, I've been fine. I've flown twice. And what was interesting last night on the airplane, took forever because we were on the LAX ramp for an hour and a half as Alaska Airline worked on the plane. Not one cough for the first 3 hours. One person coughed one time. And so what I think is happening is an effective self-quarantine. If you are sick with anything, stay home. Don't freak people out. And just stay home. If you've got sniffles or a cough. Now, Joe Biden did America a great favor last night. Here he is. He's coughing, but I don't think he's got coronavirus. Cut number 9. This was Joe Biden last night at the debate.
Well, fortunately, I don't have any of the underlying conditions you talked about that I have to worry about, number one. Number two, thank God, for the time being, anything can happen, as my mother would say, knock on wood, that I'm in good health. Number three, I'm taking all the precautions anyone would take, whether they're 30 years old or 60 years old or 80 years old. And that is, I want to make sure that I do not shake hands any longer. I do not engage. We did the same thing. Our staff is all working from home. We are not doing rallies any longer. We're doing virtual rallies. We're doing virtual town hall meetings. We're in a situation where now I do not, as I said, when we encounter people, we're not going into crowds. And so I'm taking all the precautions everyone else should be taking.
Now, he had done that after coughing often through the debate. He said he's not sick. He just had coughing. And that is why I think people should, well, I'll play it when we come back. I just think people should stay home if they're at all sick, not panic, be calm, be focused, be fact-based, do what Joe Biden just said, do what Donald Trump said. They're both saying the right things. And I do believe the president has reacted better, at least as well as anybody else would have reacted. It's a hard learning curve because we've never dealt with this before. And I am not jumping up and down on him because I think that's irresponsible. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway again, back from vacation, joined by Mike Allen of Axios. His Axios AM just landed in my mailbox minutes ago. If you were up early, you got to read Mike Allen as well. You should subscribe over at Axios.com to Mike's morning newsletter, which will be very helpful during the Great American Shutdown. Good morning, Mike. Where do we find you this morning?
Hugh, I'm at home in Arlington, Virginia. I hope you and yours are well, wishing safety and ease to all your loyal listeners.
Thank you. We are. As I said, the program's going to be throughout this period of time calm, focused, fact-based, pro-American, pro-world, non-divisive. With that in mind, Mike, how do you view the reaction of Americans thus far? I think, despite some indications, everybody's calm, and I have been literally from Hawaii to D.C. in the last 72 hours. I've been everywhere, man. I'm like Johnny Cash.
I was just thinking that. So, Americans rally, and with the exception of the toilet paper craziness, and somebody explained that no matter how bad things get, even with the coronavirus, like, you don't actually use more. But anyway, the grocery stores are replenishing almost every night. We just see the empty shelves because they're emptied so quickly. But besides from that, Hugh, Americans just want information. It's why they turn to you. It's why they turn to Axios. We did a deep dive over the weekend, the latest on what we know about the coronavirus, what's ahead. So much great reaction to that. So at the top of Axios today, we have a very factual but eye-opening piece about how much worse the testing situation is than you think. And Hugh, you've been on this for weeks, months, but Sam Baker, who's our healthcare editor, walks you through why this matters. And why it matters is that, yes, more tests are becoming available. Yes, we're getting back on the horse. But we can't catch up. And here's why. Because there hasn't been enough testing, because we're way behind, we don't know how many people have it. So the official count is low, and the number of cases are going to explode. And the practical part of that is that because we had people going around who weren't tested and didn't know it, that means that they've infected other people. And that's why it looks like the situation could be worse than we think. And so if the situation gets really bad, if it lasts longer than we think, if huge numbers of people get sick, we're going to look back on testing and say that that was a huge lapse.
And, you know, the upside of that, I'm going to try and talk about upsides, is this is a serious disease, but it is not an Ebola-like disease, and it isn't like the 1918 pandemic targeting young Americans. We know exactly who it targets, the super senior and the medically compromised, medically fragile people. I believe we will learn from this that the CDC approach to developing tests was flawed. Not intentionally. Nobody wanted to be behind the curve. It's certainly not the Trump administration's problem. CDC just produced a botched test. And I think we will learn from this a couple of lessons that will be useful for the next pandemic, which is inevitable, could happen tomorrow, in fact, that we've got to go with every test available as soon as possible whenever a new coronavirus or influenza develops. Let me ask you, Mike, do you agree with me? No one intended the test to be bad at CDC. They're great professionals. They work around the clock. They're PhDs. They're very good. Dr. Fauci is the face of public health in America, and they all feel that good. Someone feels awful about that, but I don't think we should dwell on it.
Well, Hugh, you followed this more closely than I have, but was the problem initially there were World Health Organization tests, and instead of using those, the CDC tried to develop their own?
That is correct.
The original sin?
That was the original sin, and it was standing policy to do so. And by the way, it would have happened under Trump. It would have happened under President Obama. And that standing policy, in light of what happens when you have a critical error in a critical path element, would lead us to change that policy going forward. But it wasn't a President Trump decision. It was standing CDC policy, which had to be waived, a bureaucratic, the belief that America does things better. Now, Mike, what I think is the uncovered story right now is that unlike 1918, have you read The Great Influenza yet by John Barry, by the way?
Of course, John Barry, of course, yeah.
It's such a great book. The big difference is the combined century of scientific advance that is now focused like a laser on this particular virus, the development of interventions and treatments, as well as vaccine, is so supercharged by the world's connectivity and brain power and computing power that I'm fairly optimistic interventions will arrive very quickly. The one thing that can't arrive quickly are ventilators. And I know you appreciate Jonathan Cohn over at Huffington Post. Citizen Cohn is his Twitter handle, has written a great piece on what I believe is the next critical path juncture, which is the lack of ICU capacity. I think that's where we're going to find a fairly difficult situation, Mike. Have you done any reporting on that yet?
Yeah, so front page of the Washington Post today, which one of the many miracles that is going on. I got the papers to my door in Arlington, Virginia. Amazing. I was out yesterday. Amazing how many people are still working. I always thank the people for working. I was on MSNBC early this morning, and like full house there. Just amazing how many people are keeping us informed, keeping us fed. But the front page of the Washington Post, the print paper spike in U.S. cases could force rationing of beds and ventilators. And they have a quote from the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo. We're looking at a new war no one's ever seen before. We have never fought a virus like this with this potential consequence. It's only a matter of time before ICU beds are full.
Yeah, well, that's incorrect on his part. That's ignorant of 1918 and 1920. We did, and it was disastrous, and this is far less severe than that. But I understand the problem he's referring to is that what has happened in Seattle, for example, is a near-capacity situation, which will require immediate redeployment of ventilators and the development of isolation units on the fly, and we'll do that. We're pretty good at that. But I don't like the alarmism. I really do believe we've got to get calm, focused, and fact-based and not make calamitous predictions as opposed to serious predictions. It's not 1918.
Something that we're seeing already around the country, Hugh, is hospitals with tents in their parking lot as isolation units while people are waiting for the results of their tests. A vivid scene that is playing out all across the country.
And that's a good thing. I want people to understand that's a good thing. We're doing exactly. I'm going to talk with the foreign minister of Taiwan later in the show, Minister Wu, about how they kept it low, and they did a lot of that. Mike, I would be practicing malpractice if I did not notice we had a presidential debate last night. I think Joe Biden won it decisively. In the course of that, he pledged he was going to put a woman on his ticket. I have long said, and I all through January, I talked about two things, Bernie Sanders and the virus. I wish I had been right about Sanders and wrong about the virus, but I was right about the virus and wrong about Sanders. But long ago, I predicted Kamala Harris would be on the ticket one way or the other. I think she's a mortal lock. What do you think?
So, for sure, she would be near the top of any list, but there are others on the list. And we talked on Axios on HBO with Congressman James Clyburn, who, of course, was instrumental in Vice President Biden's rise. And he said it needs to be an African-American woman and other possibilities. And he mentioned some other possibilities. So for sure, she's at the top of any list. Also, she could be Attorney General if she's not on the ticket. So there's lots of possibilities. Some of the other possibilities that Congressman James Clyburn mentioned, he mentioned Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, Congresswoman Val Demings, who we know from the impeachment days an impeachment manager, Stacey Abrams, of course, the Atlanta mayor. Keep an eye on her, Keisha Lance Bottoms. I can see her vaulting to the top of the list, maybe being one of the one or two possibilities. And the former National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, who I think also would be considered for Secretary of State in a Biden cabinet, and then he also will take a look at Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, the two senators he ran against.
Mike Allen, always a pleasure. Thank you. Write it down. Kamala Harris is a lock, but then again, I was wrong about Bernie. I was just right about the virus. Thank you, Mike Allen. Axios AM. Now, let me tell you about our friends at Food for the Poor. This is going to be a tough lift for some people because, my spring campaign to feed starving children and families in Guatemala is underway. It's my Lenten campaign. Yeah, $320, $27 a month feeds a family of 4 for a year and water for life. Well, here's Food for the Poor, Paul Jacobs.
Extreme poverty in Guatemala is literally starving thousands to death. 122 miles east of the Guatemala.
Stop that. We got the wrong clip. But the bottom line is we got the right cause. Even when America is struggling itself, it will be generous. Helping is easy. Go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Feed Starving Families banner. You can phone your gift in to 855-359-4673. Now, a lot of you are economically fragile, and you're saying, why am I going to give money away right now? It's Widow's Mite time, friends. And some of you just lost a bunch of hours. I think of United Airlines shutting down 50% of their flight. That's a lot of stewards who aren't flying. That's a lot of pilots who are not flying. That's a lot of hires that are not happening. We'll bounce back pretty quickly, I think, in fact. People will come back to work. But there isn't work to go back to in Guatemala. And there aren't shelves that will be restocked there. We need your help in Guatemala. So please be generous, even in this season of unease. Now is when the real deep generosity in the human soul steps forward. Because we've got starvation throughout that part of the world, and we need your help right now at Food for the Poor. At the top of HughHewitt.com, you can find the banner. Let me also tell you, in January, I told you to diversify. Birch Gold Group was standing by then, and they're standing by now. 2 ways to diversify. $5,000 minimum order if you want physical gold delivered to your house, or you can convert an eligible IRA or 401k into a precious metals IRA. And, I don't give you the daily gold price. It's up a lot over when I first made the recommendation. I think it will stay there and rise over the course of this. If it got worse in the fall, it would rise again. I always think it's good to diversify. You don't throw your money around. Don't sell stocks in a panic, but you can diversify if you've got bonds, which have gone up in value, into gold. You go to hughgold.com or call 1-800-434-GOLD. And I do believe if you have cash, converting some of that into physical gold for your safety deposit box is a good move. hughgold.com, 1-800-434-GOLD. Finally, I took my relief factor before I left the house today. Had to make a drive to use the backup studio because my mic processor blew up. But I already took my relieffactor.com, took it all through my Hawaiian trip, took it all through, ran 7 miles on Wednesday to Spouting Horn, if you folks know Kauai. Did the trek from Poiapu Beach down to Spouting Horn. Fine. Relieffactor.com works, keeps you moving. One of the things I want to do today is make sure I stress to people, you can keep exercising outside. If you can't go to the gym, walk. Walk a lot where there aren't crowds. Just walk. Make sure that, or as I say, trundle. I no longer call it running. My time is so slow. But trundle along, and relieffactor.com will help keep you moving. And you've got to keep moving. Just because you can't use the gym, keep working out, keep using relieffactor.com. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now for the Yinzer Report by Salena Zito. Follow her on Twitter at Salena Zito. Good morning, Salena. How goes things in Pittsburgh in the era of the pandemic?
Good morning, you. It's okay, but we're only, really this is the beginning of day 2 of this, correct?
I call it day 1 of the Great American Shutdown because everything's shut down on Sunday anyway. But I'm committed to this, Salena. Calm, focused, fact-based, pro-American, pro-world. I'm against division and distortion. I'm against sensationalism and politicization of the pandemic. I think most Americans ought to do what we did after 9/11, come together. Is that happening in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely. You saw evidence of that all over the place, beginning Friday and Saturday in Pittsburgh. Things kind of ground to a halt. You didn't see people at restaurants. If you did, they were just picking food up and taking it out, which is good, I think, because that at least helped those restaurants out at that moment. But I don't even know if we can do that anymore. And you saw people, going, for walks. I went on a hike yesterday. You saw plenty of people out in the, taking hikes on the trails. But, and for the most part, I will tell you, here and there, you saw a rush of people going to places like Whole Foods and Target for their groceries. Some people want panicking in that way. But, you didn't see, if you went to the smaller places, even like the Dollar General or the CVS or the local mom and pop shops, you didn't see that. You didn't see that rush. You saw people just buying normal amounts, and you saw the shelves weren't empty.
Did you you were at CPAC, Salena? I was off last week, so I didn't get a chance to ask you. Did you have to self-quarantine? Did you meet the infected person?
Yeah, I did self-quarantine. I was at both CPAC and APAC. And while I was only briefly in the green room, I'm not sure if this person was at any of the speeches that I gave at APAC. But yeah, I did. I self-quarantined. I stayed
and you
away.
see, I think most people are doing common sense stuff like that. I was on a 2/3 empty airplane yesterday. I heard one cough in a 5.5-hour flight. One cough, because I think people who have got the sniffles are staying home in order to decrease the likelihood, and I think people are acting responsibly. Now, Ron Klain, who was the Ebola czar, one of Joe Biden's senior advisors, and a very good guy, just tweeted out 8 minutes ago, if you're able to work from home today, take a minute to thank all the people: military, utility, grocery, drugstore, gas station, sanitation, transportation, cell phone, Wi-Fi, first responders, medical, nursing home staff, key government, and so many more who cannot. Ron is in essence saying, just be kind. I think Twitter is the worst side of the world, and the best side of America is not seen there.
Yes, that is absolutely true. I have this odd sense, and I bet you feel the same way, is that I straddle two completely different worlds. When I'm out here in the outside of Twitter, when I'm talking to people or just observing and or experiencing things outside of Twitter, people are calm, they're kind, they're helping each other out. People here in Pittsburgh were organizing ways to accumulate and distribute food to the elderly. People were watching a mass or church services from their homes, and they're adapting because they don't want to hurt their own community, because they live in their community. People don't live in Twitter.
Great point. I don't think a single American would act differently towards someone in need based on their being blue or red. I think blue or red simply dissolves into red, white, and blue during times like this.
Absolutely. I had a story I wrote yesterday where I went around and I talked to small business people and just some people that were picking up coffee or whatever in an area in Pittsburgh called Strict District. There was not one mention in any of those interviews of politics. And the most important thing is, not everyone that I interviewed said they didn't blame anyone. They're not mad at anyone. They're not mad at a politician for not doing this or that. They're not mad for how this has been handled. And most people understand this is unprecedented, and we're kind of doing it as we go along and just helping each other out. And that's who we are.
And we will figure it out. Salena Zito, I look forward. I hope you write more for the Washington Examiner this week, part of the calm, focus, and fact-based brigade here at the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hour number 2 of the Great American Shutdown continues. Joseph Wu, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of China, joins me. Remember, the Taiwanese have really done a good job with this. We'll get some lessons from Minister Wu. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Morning, Glory America. It's Hugh Hewitt back inside the Beltway on this, the first day of the Great American Shutdown. By that I mean that most people who are working from home will work from home. There have been and will continue to be cutbacks of hours and layoffs across the United States for a period of weeks. The federal government's going to step up. The House bill's pretty bad, pretty flawed, in that I don't think it gets help to people who are losing hours. I know a lot of people are saying, why don't we just stroke checks to people, and how do we do that? We'll need a big fiscal stimulus as well. They'll work on that. I would personally go and buy 3 years' worth of whatever the Pentagon needs and order every ship and airplane and submarine and everything you could buy. That's where I'd put all the stimulus. Those are great defense jobs. There's a pipeline out there. You can accelerate the pipeline as quickly as possible, but they'll work that out. Mitch McConnell's on top of it. He'll work something out with Nancy Pelosi. That'll be fine. I want to repeat a headline in yesterday's New York Times. There is plenty of food in the country. There is plenty of food in the country. Americans have been alarmed, says the subtitle, by empty grocery shelves, but food suppliers and retailers say they're struggling with surging demand. The supply chain remains strong. So more Americans are buying more stuff. And so sometimes you see an empty shelf, don't freak out. They'll resupply it. We've just got plenty of food. That's not the case everywhere in the world. We will have plenty of test kits by the end of the week, maybe by today, and we'll begin to just actually confirm what we know from Taiwan and South Korea about the most vulnerable people. This is not to the whole country what Katrina was, for example, to New Orleans. This is not to the whole country what Ebola was to the few people who got it so many years ago. This is a widespread pandemic, and many, many millions of people will get this virus. Partisan, not scoring cheap points, not going to point fingers. I will applaud that which has been done well. That's the best way to do it. I applaud President Trump closing the border with China early. This originated in Wuhan. He cut flights from China immediately. Probably gave us a month extra. There's some interesting reporting last night that the first virus case is from November in China. That came from the South China Morning Post, a Hong Kong newspaper, which is relatively free. November. The People's Republic of China knew about this, or had a case. I can't say they knew about it. They had a case. I don't want to overstate how much responsibility General Secretary Xi bears for the breakdown of his health system. But if you choose to run the country as an autocrat, you choose to own everything that happens in the country, and the PRC failed the world. That's just simply the case. The PRC failed the world. And the world is paying a price, and 50 Americans are dead, and more than 3,000 people are dead, and the numbers will go up. But we're learning every day. I believe in silver linings. The most important silver lining is that, thank God, this is not the 1918 influenza updated and just as deadly. This is a very different pandemic than that one was. That 1918 pandemic targeted young, healthy adults for whatever reason. In the etymology of the disease, the study of the disease has been made repeatedly over the decades since 1918 and 1920. And it's all summarized in The Great Influenza by John Barry. Now, I know I've mentioned that. Regular listeners to the Hugh Hewitt Show know. I spent most of January discussing the potential for a pandemic on this show and driving people crazy. I wish I had been right about Bernie and wrong about the pandemic, but I was wrong about Bernie and right about the pandemic. But of course, backwards, it doesn't matter that I was right. What matters is the world just reacted too slowly. And I got a hair trigger on this stuff because I served on a health panel during H1N1 and did the math. And if you can do the math, you know what exponential growth is. And I always focus on pandemics because the threat is coming, as Admiral Stavridis said on this program on January 22nd. We are overdue for this. Here's the silver lining. We are learning in real time what to do and what not to do. We're learning what rules that develop like barnacles on the bureaucratic system that need to be done away with. We are learning how to collaborate, and we have the entire world's scientific genius collaborating. In the first hour, I read the story from the Times of Israel, where, by the way, the president of Israel has tapped Benny Gantz to form a government. I'm just stunned by that, but it's their country. I don't get it. I don't think he'll be successful. I think 6 weeks from now, he'll try Netanyahu, and Netanyahu won't be successful and have another election. Meanwhile, Netanyahu remains the prime minister. Unless Benny Gantz did what would be best for the country and the world. I'm really looking to Israel, along with the American medical establishment, to develop the interventions that are needed to treat and the vaccine that is needed to protect. I'm really looking to Israel and the United States to do that. I think Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu ought to flip a coin in public and rotate prime ministership. And that the Israeli parliament ought to say, whatever you did, fine by us. You know, we're not going to shut this country down during a pandemic with Hezbollah going crazy, with Iran up against the wall and likely to lash out. We're going to have a national unity government. Flip a coin to who goes first. Honestly, I just do not understand why they don't do that. We had a debate last night. Bernie did not take it. Bernie doesn't know how to debate any better than I know how to skydive. And Joe Biden was just Joe Biden, cut number 3.
And in concert with all the forces that we need to bring to bear to deal with the crisis now. So no one's thrown out of their home. No one loses their mortgage. No one is kicked out of their house. No one loses their paycheck. No one is in a position where they have a significant financial disability as a consequence of this of this particular crisis.
Thank you, Vice.
SARS. Nope, not SARS. It's coronavirus, Mr. Vice President. Here is his first answer on the coronavirus, cut number 11.
First of all, my heart goes out to those who have already lost someone or those who are suffering from the virus. And this is bigger than any one of us. This calls for a national rallying to everybody move together. And, I laid out in detail what I would do if were I president today. You can go to joebiden.com and I laid it out in significant detail. But there are 3 pieces to this. First of all, I have to take care of those who, in fact, are exposed or likely to be exposed to the virus. And that means we have to do testing. We have to get the testing kits up and ready. I would have the World Health Organization. I take advantage of the test kits they have available to us, even though the president says 1 million or more are coming. Let's just get all the tests we can done as quickly as we can. Secondly, I would make sure that every state in the union had at least 10 places where they had drive-through testing arrangements. I would also, at this point, deal with the need to begin to plan for the need for additional hospital beds. We have that capacity in the Department of Defense as well as with the FEMA. And they can set up 100-bed, 500-bed hospitals in tents quickly. We have to lay all that out. But we have to deal with the economic fallout quickly. And that means making sure the people who, in fact, lose their job, don't get a paycheck, can't pay their mortgage, are able to pay it and pay them now. And do it now. Small businesses be able to borrow interest-free loans. I see my time is up here. You're going to hold us tightly, I assume. But that's what I would do. Go to joebiden.com. It lays out precisely what I would do were I president today.
Well, President Trump's already done that, so he's agreeing with President Trump, and I'm glad that he did. Scott Gottlieb, former commissioner of FDA, said this on Face the Nation yesterday, cut number 20.
Look, I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to talk to officials in the White House all through this. Some of the calls that I was making to them, the conversations I was having go back to January. They've been on top of this. I mean, they've been concerned about this. I've been talking to White House staff, and the staff's been concerned about this. And so I'm going to continue to try to provide whatever help I can.
Yeah, I too have been talking with senior members of the administration from the beginning. They have been following it from the beginning. They are on top of it. I can't blame the administration for the CDC faulty test. We have learned from that not to rely on the CDC exclusively, but to buy everything, to do everything, all of the above we have learned for the future. In the meantime, let's pull together and work together as Americans. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Back. Thanks to Kurt Schlichter, Bob Franz for sitting in for me last week. We had a wonderful week away. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did on Kauai. Flew back to California on Friday. I flew back to the Beltway on Sunday. Left the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt behind in California. Family is there. And I just thought I'd be working pretty hard over the next week. And therefore, actually month. And social distancing is good. And I did not want her to have, I got to go out and about. I'm a reporter. I'm a commentator. I meet with people. I report. And so she's just going to stay there. I'm going to be down to the almonds pretty quick, though. I really don't. I'm going to lose weight. I always lose weight when she's not with me. Tom Conant is on Fox and Friends. Let's chip in and hear what he has to say.
Welfare agencies that are set up to quickly get cash into the hands of affected workers and their families.
That makes sense.
Dr. Oz?
You exclude large companies, people with more than 500 employees. I'm just curious why you don't, but the House did. Why 500? Why that number? Why not 250 or 750?
Yeah, I don't know, Dr. Oz, and I got to tell you, I've heard from a lot of business owners across Arkansas over the weekend who have more than 500 employees but cannot afford to advance their pay if they don't have any revenue coming in. Just think about that. If you're a company that is totally shut down and you have to pay your entire workforce, but you have no revenue coming in the door, you're not going to be able to last very long. We don't want businesses to shut down after giving 2 weeks of leave to workers and have workers not be able to get back to their business. That's why we want to protect both affected workers and their families by getting cash into their hands quickly, but not put burdens on those businesses. And in fact, we want to extend them support as well so they can service their debt, so they don't have cash flow problems, and they will be an open, viable business in a month or two when we're through this pandemic.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay, Tom Cotton makes so much sense. By the way, he was the first elected official, the first in America to say this is a bad problem. First one. Did it on this show, as far as I can tell. First one. Applauding the president's shutdown of incoming from China. He's been ahead of this, and he's ahead of it now. Go big, go fast on relief. Go big, go fast. I also believe that the Congress is going to do a stimulus, and I hope when they do a stimulus, they throw all the money at the Department of Defense besides the affected industry relief. I mean, you've got cruise ships and airlines, hotels, the travel business. They all need relief. Sort of like a giant 9/11 fund. After 9/11, we had a victims fund. Here we need to just hose down the affected industries with money. Now, Amazon doesn't need any money. Amazon's going to make more money than God. In fact, I see they were up $108 on Friday, and, they'll have another wild day today on Wall Street. Let me bring you a market update brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. And AndrewandTodd.com, they're one of the businesses that are overwhelmed with business. I don't even know if you can get refinancing now. I know you can purchase, and a lot of people are, because loan companies are going to fund purchases. They may not fund refinancing right now. I don't know. You've got to call 888-888-1172 and talk to Andrew Del Rey or Todd Avakian. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend money. And last week was just a crazy week. I sent them a couple of notes, said, what's going on? And for a while, they weren't lending refis, and then they reopened, and the markets are just kind of bumpy because interest rates are so low that lenders know they don't really want to lend at this level. And overnight, we saw England down 6%, and Germany down 7%, and Japan down 2%. That volatility will continue until the South Korean and Taiwan news spreads out. People realize it can be contained and confronted, and that it's not going to kill millions of people. And when that happens, markets will rebound. Please don't sell into a panic. Please buy into a panic if you're looking for real estate. Call AndrewandTodd.com at 888-888-1172. That was your market story of the day, AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple questions. They'll tell you what you can buy, where you can buy it, how much you qualify for. It is the one sector of the industry that's going to do well through this, home buying. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Huniverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.huniverse.com.
Dr. Joseph Wu, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Joseph Wu is Foreign Minister of Taiwan, the country that has done the best job with coronavirus, as far as I can tell. Minister Wu, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Hugh. I'm very glad to be able to be on the show.
Well, I'm very happy to have you because you are a Buckeye. You're an Ohio State University PhD. Urban Meyer listens to the program, so go Bucks and go Taiwan. Minister,
thank you very much.
Minister Wu, how come Taiwan has done so much better than any other country? 50 cases, I think one confirmed death as of Friday. What did you do that the rest of the world needs to copy vis-a-vis the virus?
Even though we are quite successful so far, but our doctors or experts, our CDC officials are still very cautious at this moment. We are receiving more export or import cases these couple of days. As we see it, we survived the first wave, the wave of origin from China, and then later by Korea, which is Asian countries. Now we are facing the second wave, which is the wave coming from Europe. Even though we are doing very well, but there's still cases coming in, and we know that there will be more coming over to this part of the world, which might be the United States. We will characterize it as a third wave. And we have to be very careful every minute in order to stay successful. And you asked about why or how we do better than other countries. I can tell you that we learned it from our experience. Taiwan was hit very hard by SARS back in 2002 and 2003. And we learned the lesson. And therefore, we try to structure the government to deal with an epidemic like this. So when we heard that there was some suspicious cases in Wuhan, China, we jumped up ahead of what may happen to us. We started our command center. We started our task force in dealing with the situation. And when the situation is getting worse in China, we mobilized the whole government to deal with the situation. We try to control the border. We try to set up quarantine mechanism, and we try to set up tracing mechanism to deal with those cases, including the contact. And the government is also issuing public messaging policies. And we also set up ration mechanism for materials for us to face the situation. So this is what we do altogether. And so far, it's been successful.
Now, do you believe that the best practices that Taiwan has adopted are applicable and indeed possible to replicate in the United States?
Of course. If you look at the CDC officials in Taiwan, actually they are being trained by the U.S. CDC officials. So what we have been doing are actually taught by the U.S. CDC officials. So if the United States started early, I'm sure the United States will be able to deal with the situation like the way Taiwan is dealing with it. But I think if you look at the U.S. situation right now, it might be a little too late as we see that New York, Washington State, and also California, they already have a widespread community spread. And the situation can only be contained if we try to eliminate the community spread rather than do it the way Taiwan is doing. We do it from zero, but the United States has to face the situation from a situation that there's already community spread. But of course, we need to work together with the United States at this moment or in the future. If we are going to fight the epidemic, I think there has to be a global effort, and Taiwan is ready to work with the United States.
Minister Wu, they had community spread on the mainland, and drastic measures were adopted. Do you think those measures are what every country, whether it's Italy, Germany, the United States, or countries which will eventually be hit, should adopt the same sort of draconian measures that were adopted on the mainland?
I don't think so. China is an authoritarian country, and it's adopting those measures in gross violation of human rights, and that is not the way to do it. I think there can be a more humane way of dealing with the situation. as fellow democracies facing the same situation. I think we can find better ways in dealing with it rather than the way China is dealing with it.
I'd like to ask you about the PRC, if I can, Minister Wu. There is an effort by some in the PRC to imply that the U.S. military created the virus. There is an attempt by some to suggest it was not first found in Wuhan. What do you make of those claims? Why are they making those claims?
Well, when the coronavirus started in Wuhan, we sent our CDC officials and experts to that area to make investigation. And we knew that there was something wrong in that place. But the Chinese government officials were rather quiet about the real situation. And I think right now the world already knows where that is started. And that is the term that we use to describe these kinds of coronavirus. We call it Wuhan pneumonia coronavirus. And I think that's the way the U.S. is calling it right now. But the Chinese understand that its national reputation suffered tremendously in the last few months because of the coronavirus. And what he's trying to do is trying to overturn that kind of situation. Other than blaming the United States or blaming American soldiers of carrying the virus into Wuhan area, I think the Chinese are also coming out in a very strong way through its propaganda that it is the savior of the world right now. It can provide relief material. It can provide protection to the countries that are affected by the coronavirus. So this is the situation, like trying to turn black into white. And that is something that I'm sure the United States would find unacceptable. And that is something that we try to ignore. Whatever comes out of China, we in Taiwan need to focus on our fight against coronavirus.
I want to come back to Taiwan's fight in just a moment, but let me stay on General Secretary Xi for a moment. He's been on a losing streak. He's mishandled relations with Taiwan, with Hong Kong. He lost a round in the trade war to Donald Trump. He's managing an economy that is genuinely in collapse right now. Is he in trouble?
That is something that we are watching very carefully. The United States is half a globe away from China, and the United States has been watching China already. And we are only like 60 miles away from China, and China is being threatened in Taiwan. So we have been watching very carefully on what's happening in China. And I agree with you that the Chinese economy has already been slowing down even before the coronavirus hit. And there are discontent inside China when we see more and more people are out of jobs. And the anger, the public anger, may gear at President Xi Jinping, who is the top leader, who is the top decision maker, and if something is going wrong in China, he is to blame. But we have been very careful in monitoring the situation without trying to provoke China. And as you know, and our audience may know also, that the traditional wisdom, the easiest way for them to find a scapegoat is to launch a war or create crisis with countries outside its border. And Taiwan can be a very convenient scapegoat. So we are staying watchful, and we have been trying to be very careful in dealing with China.
2 months ago, Minister Wu, I would never have asked this question.
But I always say that I made a terrible mistake in 1989 when I wrote my PhD dissertation. I thought that the Soviet Union at the time was a concrete block. Nothing is going to change. But it took only a few months to prove myself wrong. So it's going to be very hard to see what China is going to evolve like. But I do see public discontent toward the government. Nevertheless, the government is still in the very good control of the society in general at this moment. But if the economy goes down further because of the coronavirus or other issues, I'm sure the Chinese government is going to face very serious challenges domestically.
Now, Minister Wu, in Taiwan, let's turn back to the economy. The focus this week in the United States will be on fiscal and monetary stimulus. Our Federal Reserve has cut interest rates to zero. They're doing purchase programs. There will be a fiscal stimulus out of Congress. I hope it's devoted to defense spending primarily, as well as relief to the businesses affected. What has Taiwan done to keep its economy going forward at full speed?
In the last few years, we did a structural reform. In the previous years, Taiwan's economy depends on, reliance on China or domestic manufacturing. We know that is not enough. So in the last few years, we turned towards innovation, either in high technology or in green power or in the biomedical technology or even in the defense providing infrastructure, a large batch of infrastructure construction projects in order to stimulate the economy further. And I think in the last few years, we see that Taiwan's economy has been
seen that will end this problem. How is Taiwan's medical research industry?
Taiwan's medical research capability is rather good. We are trying to develop the best test kits. We might be able to test when someone might be infected within 15 minutes. And we are also doing research together with the United States on vaccines. We are also developing medicines to treat the infected patients. And this is the joint research with the United States. And just these few days, we are discussing further with the United States to see if there can be more collaboration in between the two countries. In fact, we are calling for a global collaboration in fighting against the coronavirus, not only the vaccines or medicine. We are also calling for the international community, especially the United States at this moment, to see how we can trace the infected cases and to trace those people who might have come in contact with the infected cases. And I think these are going to be very effective mechanisms in dealing with the situation.
We look forward to that cooperation. I look forward to having you back, Minister Wu, and I'm very, very happy that the Foreign Minister of Taiwan is a Buckeye. That is very good news. Thank you for joining me. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Many of you noticed that, I'm looking at my new compressor. I'm so happy. It's a new 286S compressor. I'm going to install it in my other studio myself. I don't have Dwayne to mess it up. I'm so happy about that. You may have noticed that I just did not plug Relief Factor in my normal, because I wanted every second of Minister Wu as possible. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take your Relief Factor this morning. You should. Because listen to me now, in the time of the virus, you can't go to the gym. A lot of the gyms are going to shut down for social distancing purposes for a few weeks. You can and should be outside in the open air, walking by yourself or with your loved one, someone with whom you're in close contact anyway, and putting those miles in and moving. You've got to be more active than ever. You don't want to go walking through crowds, but there are lots of places to walk where you're just not going to get, remember, it's a droplet spread virus. ReliefFactor.com helps you by carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega combined to keep you moving, keep you going, and keep you commuting. Some of you are going to find the commutes are a lot quicker. Oh, we got to LAX yesterday in like record time. And so the commute out there isn't bad right now. There's silver lining to everything. But a lot of people aren't working, and they'll be working out, because if you're not going to work, you might as well work out by walking or trundling or running if you can run, or climbing. Outdoors, doing stuff. But you need your ReliefFactor.com to do that. Please, please go and get it. Just go to ReliefFactor.com. You also know that over the weekend, many Americans got their first glimpse of empty store shelves when major retailers like Target and Walmart ran out of basics like pasta, soup, and other items. It was unnerving. Now, there is no food shortage in the United States. New York Times reported there just isn't. There's a supply chain. They take a day to catch up. They restock. There's plenty of food in the United States. That's not the case in Guatemala, where kids are literally starving and thirsty, and empty shelves are a way of life because they cannot afford food or clean, safe drinking water, as you hear in this report.
Extreme poverty in Guatemala is literally starving thousands to death. 122 miles east of the Guatemalan capital, there are families that have not eaten in days. We spent 2 days just drinking water. The children here are incredibly vulnerable. The famine has created malnutrition so severe that it has generated a humanitarian crisis.
Now, that crisis is going to continue even though the United States is going through its own crisis. It takes a special kind of person to donate abroad when there are problems at home. But I'd like you to think about that. Feed starving family. America never stops helping the world. Individual Americans never stop helping Food for the Poor. Go to HughHewitt.com, find the banner at the very top, or call 855-359-4673. 855-359-HOPE. Set a standard for the world. Show people that we keep helping even when we are ourselves under stress. Now, a word about the stimulus. I keep coming back to this because I know that people are driving into the Hill today. I know they're listening to me. And I know that senators and congressmen are among them. By all means, target relief to every worker who's lost hours and every business. You know, I keep thinking Twitter's been so ridiculously, absurdly completely snark-filled, and people aren't even thinking about the restaurateur who planned a year to open this week, to the bride who planned a wedding, to the of course, the elderly who are scared to death, people with medically fragile situations for whom stress is an additional factor. There's so much grief and concern. I do not understand the snark, but you don't have to be a part of that. You can be part of the positive reinforcement of everything good that's going on out there. And one of the good things that's going on is Congress is going to respond. They're going to pass a bill. They need to target relief to people who've lost hours and jobs in industries that are affected, airlines, travel industry, cruise ships, etc. And they need a general fiscal stimulus. Now, the last time we did a stimulus, 2009, the money was gone and no one knew where it went. That was the Obama-Biden stimulus. $850 billion, whoosh, gone. I hope that this Congress says, we're going to spend a stimulus and we're going to do it through DOD procurement. We're going to buy everything the Pentagon needs for the next 2 years. We're going to double down on everything. You want one Columbia, we're going to give you two Columbia. You want, we were going to shut down the F-18. We're going to make some more of the F-18s. We can always use more fighter pilot, even though that's fourth generation fighter, not five. If we can increase the production of the F-35, do that. If we can increase ship construction, do that. Buy stuff, because the defense industry redounds to the benefit of everybody across the United States. So don't just, we need to hose down the country with money. The Fed's doing what it can. That's great. Liquidity matters, and they're going to be a bumpy day on the market today. It's going to be absolutely bumpy for a couple of weeks till we get a handle on where and how, and the fact that we do not have a worst case scenario. You prepare for a worst case scenario and you hope for the worst case scenario not happening. But the worst case scenario is not going to cripple the United States long term. It's going to hurt it short term. But we can fix that. And if people are telling you otherwise, don't believe them. This is all endurable. The joke running around Facebook yesterday, your grandfather was called to go to war. You're called to sit on your couch and watch Netflix. That's very true. And meanwhile, the medical science industrial complex of America and other great countries like Taiwan and Israel working overtime, we will get interventions. We will get a vaccine. We will get through this. Stay tuned. Hour number 3 coming up.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, Jonah. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt back in the Beltway after a week off. Thanks to Kurt Schlichter. Thanks to Bob Franz for sitting in for me. It is day one of the Great American Shutdown. I mean, the weekend didn't really count. Today is when we begin to see it. As you heard me say at the beginning of the show, we are in our 9/11 mode. Calm, focused, fact-based, pro-American, pro-world, with a bias towards silver linings and good news and a bias against division and distortion, sensationalism and politicization of the pandemic. Alex Haley has it on his tombstone, find the good and praise it. That's what you'll find here. And one of the good guys, Jonah Goldberg, joins me. Good morning, Jonah. How are you?
Hey, Hugh. Great to be here.
How are you social distancing?
Well, Hugh, I kind of feel like I've prepared my whole life for this. My misanthropy, my hermiting, my ability to spend enormous amounts of time binge-watching TV and drinking by myself has made me perfectly suited for the crisis that we're in.
All right, well, I'm not far behind you, but I must say, I had to fly yesterday on a two-thirds empty Alaska airline plane, and I heard exactly one cough on the whole 5.5-hour flight from California. My assumption is people are doing a pretty good job of not endangering other people. Do you think that message has gotten through? I noticed in the dispatch this morning, the repeat of David French's eloquent appeal to young people not to endanger their nanas.
I think the message has largely gotten through, certainly to the populations that need to hear it the most. I got to say, I'm a little dismayed by these polls about partisan divide on this stuff. And I think one of the things that I think people are giving short shrift to isn't so much that it's right-wingers don't believe in science and all this kind of stuff. It's partly a geographical divide, right? It's part of that sort of self-sorting. And there are a lot of people who think, like my wife was out in Alaska, last week, and they just all think this is some East Coast hysteria. And so I think some of that needs to trickle through. The stuff in Nashville was bad. A lot of young people, I understand that they think they're immortal, and they are kind of immune to this to a certain extent. But that stuff still needs to get under control. But, look, the president, as of that press conference last Friday, is now signaling that he takes this very seriously. The government seems to be taking this very, very seriously. Big business taking it seriously. My colleagues at Fox News are finally taking it very seriously. So, I think we're on the right course.
Now, I spent all of January on two subjects, and really only two. And I was so wrong about Bernie Sanders, and I was so right about the virus, and I wish it was reversed. I wish I'd been right about Bernie Sanders and wrong about the virus, but I was right about the virus. I am especially concerned, though, that the People's Republic of China is attempting to divert from their original sin of the coronavirus, and just had on Taiwan's Foreign Minister Joseph Wu, who was very explicit about this. Do you think that anyone is falling for the propaganda line that China is pushing, rather subtly in some instances, rather brusquely in others?
I don't know. And I got to admit, I wrote a column, I don't know, like a week ago, 10 days ago, saying, the whole brouhaha about whether to call it the Chinese coronavirus or the Wuhan virus was really a distraction. But it has now become so clear that China is determined to pursue this propaganda line. And if they're going to do that, then I don't think it's crazy to insist on calling it the Wuhan virus or the Chinese coronavirus, because it's one thing when the world just agrees to call it COVID-19 and everyone understands it comes from Wuhan, but that's fine. It's another thing when the Chinese government, as a matter of state propaganda, is trying to say that this came out of an American, bio-warfare unit. That requires much more vigorous pushback. Is anyone buying it? I don't. Right now, it doesn't seem like it. But with a lot of, conspiracy theories are a lot like viruses. They start from a very low base of believers, but they grow geometrically. And you could see in 18 months this becoming a kind of widespread, misinformation campaign with some purchase.
100% correct. I also fear all of the Russian bots that trolled our 2016 election, they will not pass by this opportunity to sow division in the United States. Or do you think I'm wrong about that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And and as with the Russian bots, it is often very difficult to tell just jerks on American soil who like to be pains in the butt and mischief makers. I got over the weekend what seemed to be like personal emails from people saying, "Hey, read this whole thing. This is really interesting." Blah 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 blah. I got it like 9 times from a bunch of different people. There are these like stupid, viral email things that are trying to say that this is all a hoax and all these kinds of stuff. And some of it probably comes from just, Peckerwoods in their own basement in America who are just jerks. And some of it is probably orchestrated from abroad. And it's just very difficult to tell the difference.
Yeah, last night the National Security Council, my buddy O'Brien, put out a tweet. Do not believe the threats of martial law. There's a lot of attempt to destroy America by our enemies, and there's a lot of jerks. Let me turn to the stimulus, because you wrote extensively in your books on previous efforts of big government to solve problems. And you and I know the limits of their ability to do so. Nevertheless, this is one of those times like 2008, 9/11, where I think you have to wash the floor down with money in the affected industries, and you need to do a fiscal stimulus. I would direct it at the Department of Defense, which ends up employing people. What would you do, Jonah Goldberg, in terms of the fiscal stimulus? The Fed's done everything they can do thus far.
Yeah, this is a really tough one because I can't think of another thing that creates both a demand shock and a supply shock in the same way. One thing I'm on the watch out for is, there seems to be something about coronavirus that it confirms everyone's priors. So, you had Bernie Sanders last night saying this proves the need for socialism. I'm more skeptical than some of my friends are about how much the Fed can do, but that doesn't mean I'm against what the Fed is doing. I'm cautiously optimistic or pessimistic about how much success it's going to have. I wouldn't mind just sort of direct cash to human beings.
Now, what do you think of this, Jonah? I've floated this idea. I've got some takers and some vociferous critics. There's trillions of dollars in retirement savings and tax-advantaged accounts, which Americans can't reach because they are penalized if they're under the age of 60, I believe, or 62, and they have to pay current taxes. What if we allowed a quarter of the trillions of dollars out there to come out with a 10% tax, a flat tax? And you know what people would do with that? They'd buy stocks with that, because the stock market is not artificially depressed, but it's way depressed because of panic. I think Americans ought to be allowed to use their own money in a crisis.
Philosophically, I'm not all that opposed to it. I am so much more worried about the people who, if they got an infusion of cash, they would spend it on groceries, not on stocks. The waiters, the Uber drivers, the cab drivers, the people who, I listened to an interview on NPR the other morning about, a barber. He's like, look, I can't telecommute. I can't work from home, and this is my only source of income. Those are the kind of I really worry about the small businesses, which are the sort of the niche species in the ecosystem of our economy. The big corporations, they can borrow enough money from themselves, never mind the Fed, lowered interest rates, to stay afloat throughout this. It's the little guys, it's the restaurants, it's the hot dog stands that I really worry about, and figuring out a way to just sort of do direct cash to them seems much more important to me.
It's almost impossible to vision the wedding planner who's suddenly out of work but has 2 children and employs 25 people. It's almost impossible to imagine what a 2-month shutdown does to America. So, Jonah, I want to close on the find the good and praise it theme of Alex Haley. I think Pelosi is conducting herself well. I want to find people that I don't normally praise and praise them. What do you think?
I think you're right. And I think, look, it worries me a little bit that it might be a sign of the apocalypse, but when Ted Cruz and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez agree on stuff, it's worth pointing out. And I got to say, I think Mike Pence is doing a very good job, a very reassuring job. And I think that, and there's this good idea out there for people of means. I think it's a good idea. A lot of people have claimed credit for it. But if you have the ability, go to a small business and buy a gift certificate. They can use the money now, and you can get the value for it later. But it's sort of like a no-interest loan to these small businesses to help them stay afloat.
1,000. The good side of social media is I saw that idea and I'm going to do it today. I also saw the idea that food stores ought to open an hour early and limit shoppers to the elderly so that they can shop in a fairly safe environment. We'll see good stuff coming. It's a good idea. And I just saw it on Twitter. There's one good thing on Twitter. I feel like, Abram walking towards Sodom and Gomorrah and finding one good thing before Twitter is burned down. Jonah Goldberg, always a pleasure. Follow him at Jonah Dispatch. Read the Dispatch every day. Come back early and often. Jonah, don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. No, it's not, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. I feel fine. I am fine. I've been in Kauai where for a week, Fetching Mr. 2 and I planned a vacation last year, and no interruption. Hawaii is very, very, very calm. Restaurants were full. There are only one or two community transmission cases, and I think they're on the main island. And so we flew direct in, and it was just basically, I think it's going to empty out. Not a crisis. Flew back to California, spent a day there, flew on to the Beltway, dropped the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt off in California because I think it's a little bit easier for her social distancing given what I have to do on work side. I'd rather her just be not around me for a little bit because I'm going to be meeting with people and doing my job. And so I can't just stay home because I'm not sick. And if I ever get any symptoms, I'll go get tested. But I am going to practice good practices, which you should do. I think one good practice is not to panic. As I've already told you many times on this show going forward, calm, focused, fact-based, pro-American, pro-world with a bias towards silver lining and the good news out there, a bias against division and distortion, sensationalism, politicization of the pandemic. Alex Haley, the great novelist who wrote Roots, often cited by Lamar Alexander as having on his tombstone, find the good and praise it. We did that after 9/11. We did that after the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. We did it in 2008. We did it during H1N1, Ebola, calm, focused, factual. We are confronting a serious but not a catastrophic situation. All right, it's not a catastrophe. And by the way, some people are going to do very well. I know the market. This is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avake in there with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money to buy houses. People who are going to do really well are people who are buying houses right now. I don't know that you can get refinancing right now. The rates are so low. I don't know. Call and ask. 888-888-1172. But I know you can buy. If you were planning to go in the real estate market, you can buy and they will close. But you have to start with AndrewandTodd.com. You know, on Friday, the Dow went up almost 2,000 points. It could fall that much today. We don't know. We have no idea. Because at some point, money managers say, you know, that's the bottom. This is nuts. I can get Amazon for $1,700. I'm going to buy Amazon. That's the only stock I own, so it's the only one I ever refer to. Otherwise, I own bonds and mutual funds, and bonds have done very well. And I think people ought to take into account that you should never sell into a panic if you can avoid it. Never sell into a panic. But if you can buy in a panic, you are often the world's smartest person. I'll talk with Brian Wesbury at the bottom of this hour. But I know the 10-year Treasury is still below 1%, and that interest rates for purchases are really, really attractive, and you ought to try and do it if you can. AndrewandTodd.com. That was the morning business report. Let me also remind everyone, the world crises that were out there beforehand, whether it is ISIS. We lost 2 Marines last week, then 2 Army guys the week thereafter. 2 weeks ago, Marines, last week, Army. The wars go on, and famine goes on wherever it's found. And we can't forget the lost and the least abroad. Food for the Poor is running their spring Lenten campaign, which I do every year. You know, I looked at it during the week, and people continued to contribute. Bob Franz, Kurt Schlichter made appeals. Thanks to all of you. We got a ways to go, though. $320 from someone out there. You know, Americans work for Food for the Poor. You can help them do their job delivering food to the absolutely desperate people in the highlands of Guatemala. Don't forget the world while we focus on America's problem. Please don't. And if you can be generous, now is the time. Your gift goes a lot further when other people just don't have the means to do it because they've been laid off or they're looking at, you know, talking to the steward in the plane yesterday. They expect layoffs in Alaska. They do. They just do. They 50% of United flights were shut down. A lot of people are going to have to conserve. So those who don't have to, please give more, dig deeper. Food for the Poor has a banner at HughHewitt.com, or you can simply call Food for the Poor at 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-HOPE. Come right back. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt back inside the Beltway, back from vacation, playing pandemic music, joined now by Alex Conant of Firehouse Strategies, one of the better political consultants in America. Alex, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm doing probably about as well as everyone in America. It's scary, strange times we live in, but one day at a time, and so far I'm asymptomatic. So
yeah, it's serious, but it's not catastrophic. That's my view. Serious, but not catastrophic. Tell me what you think the impact of last night's debate on the presidential campaign is, as well as the impact of the virus on the presidential campaign.
So, good questions. I actually watched the debate last night, and as somebody who's worked for a lot of presidential candidates, I just thought it was fascinating to see a debate without an audience. It just made it seem so much more serious and sober, and you could actually hear the candidates talk. They weren't just going for applause lines. I thought it was a good night for Biden. I think Biden went into the debate, obviously the front runner in the Democratic race. And he had a good night by Democratic standards. And frankly, I think even reaching out to moderates, he made a very articulate case against single-payer health care in the midst of probably the greatest challenge that our healthcare system has ever seen. So I give him props for standing his ground against Bernie Sanders, for running a really good campaign. And after last night's debate, I just don't know how Bernie Sanders could ever turn this around and become the nominee. I think we should expect a Trump versus Biden race this fall. And what that looks like with the coronavirus, I think, is anyone's guess. Obviously, this is not going to be a traditional campaign for either Trump or Biden in the next few months. I think Trump, if he were wise, would effectively suspend his campaign and focus 100% of his time and resources on the coronavirus. And for Biden, he won't be able to campaign. Look, if he was in California, he'd be in isolation right now, where the governor has said everyone above the age of 65 should hunker down. And obviously, Biden is well above that, as is Trump. So, look, there's not going to be rallies for a long time. I think you're going to see less and less candidate travel. That means fewer interviews, or if they're doing interviews, they're going to be remote. More of these virtual campaigning, which, frankly, I suspect is not all that effective. It's just going to be very strange. And then,
it is going to be a campaign unlike any. In fact, Jimmy Carter ran a Rose Garden campaign in 1980 and got blown out in the middle of an extended hostage crisis. However, running a Rose Garden campaign in the middle of social distancing has appeal. And as the president has said, he has 70 million impressions every time he hits the tweet button. Joe Biden does not have that. And I do think there are some built-in advantages to the incumbent in a race like this, in a period like this.
There certainly may be, Hugh. I don't disagree with that at all. Look, I think if this pandemic is as bad as the health authorities say it will be, this whole election is going to come down to a referendum on Trump's handling of it. And if 6 months from now, you and I are talking about how the economy is in the tank and how lots of people have died, that's a real challenge for Trump politically. And you hate, at times like this to think about the political implications of this. But I think because, to your point, Biden is going to have a lot of trouble getting out there campaigning, whereas Trump is going to be front and center every day until whenever this crisis ends. It does become a referendum on the president, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think, and Jimmy Carter lost that referendum in 1980.
Exactly.
Decisively.
Exactly.
And so I just think the parallel with 1980 is exact, except that Ronald Reagan could go coast to coast and energize his base, and Joe Biden can't. Now, last night, Joe Biden, the most significant piece of news he committed to a female as his running mate. I think the odds of Kamala Harris being that individual are prohibitive. What do you think?
She certainly seems like she would be a favorite, and I saw there was a survey this morning. I can't remember where I saw it, but there was a public survey this morning that listed her at the very top of the list. I do expect that Biden will also look at some of the Midwest senators, especially Senator Klobuchar, but from Minnesota, my home state, but also potentially Senator Baldwin from neighboring Wisconsin. Those are two swing states. They're a little bit lower profile female senators who he hasn't had famous dust-ups with on stage. I think Kamala's campaign left a lot of things lacking, or at least she really underperformed some early expectations. But clearly, she's going to be on the short list. And just from a strategist perspective, I've advised a lot of presidential candidates going into debates, and I thought it was fascinating and pretty smart of the Biden campaign to have that news nugget in the vice president's back pocket. He clearly went into the debate planning to make that news, knowing that was going to be the headline coming out of it. I thought that was pretty smart.
Now, here's where he stumbled last night. Cut number 5.
Number one, no more subsidies for fossil fuel industry. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill. Period. Ends.
Okay, then he said this, cut number 6.
No new fracking. And by the way, on the Recovery Act, I was able to make sure we invested $90 billion in making sure
Alex, no new fracking, no new oil development. That is catastrophic to Western Pennsylvania. It is. It's a catastrophic decision on the team Biden's part to put itself opposite the American energy industry. What did you think of that?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It plays well in the Democratic primary. It plays well to the audience that was watching it last night, which is a Democratic Party that is very anti-big oil and really wants Biden's clearly trying to unite that audience, but it's not going to play well in big parts of the country, including Western Pennsylvania. I thought what Biden might have pointed out is that as long as oil is trading at $25, $30 a barrel, there's not going to be any new oil drilling. There's not going to be any new fracking at those prices. But for him to stand on a stage and say he's not going to allow it seemed politically problematic, to say the least.
Yeah, cut 5 and 6 go on my screen of memorable Biden quotes. Calling coronavirus SARS is a minor gaffe compared to a policy substantive declaration. Another one is this one, Joe Biden, cut number 2.
It's not my view. It's not my view. And by the way, everybody who has been in the Congress voted for the Hyde Amendment at one point or another because it was locked in other bills. The reason why I affirmatively came out opposed to the Hyde Amendment was that if we're going to have public funding for all health care along the line, there is no way you could allow for there to be a requirement that you have Hyde Amendment. A woman who doesn't have the money could not have coverage under health care.
Well, I'm glad.
Number 2, and I've done that. I did that a while ago, okay?
Public funding for abortion. Alex Conant, again, playing to the left side of the Democratic primary. He is not letting Bernie off of the mat, right? He's finishing him off. But I just believe that does not play well in America.
Oh, no, clearly it doesn't. This is what we've seen every Democratic presidential candidate do as long as I can remember. They run to the left during the primaries, including talking about public funding for abortions. And then during the general election, they pivot to the middle. This is Biden's challenge, right? The Democratic Party, as we saw in the primaries, is incredibly divided. You have a lot of very liberal voters who have no patience for moderates within the Democratic Party, and then you also just have a lot of identity politics within the Democratic Party. Both of which I think are problematic for Biden in terms of uniting the party. I think his challenge now is can we lay those differences aside and unite the party simply in an effort to defeat Trump? I was a little surprised that he didn't lean more into that messaging, the anti-Trump messaging at the debate last night, and instead he took some of these very liberal policy positions. But it's certainly not a character for past Democratic candidates.
Now, fully aware that if the virus remains the issue du jour, it will change the election. But generally speaking, I wrote this for the Washington Post last week. It's an election on four categories: temperament, capacity, personnel, and policy. There are temperament issues across the divide about both candidates. There is a capacity issue across the divide on both candidates. I think it is more pronounced for Biden. The personnel that they would surround themselves with, the Metternich of MSNBC, Ben Rhodes, and those sorts of people for Joe Biden versus the Mike Pompeos and the Mark Espers. And then there are the policies. Which of these four categories, Alex Conant, will matter the most?
I mean, I think it's the temperament and the personality, especially if America continues. It seems impossible that life will return to normal by November. I think Americans are going to continue to be very concerned about the future, and they're going to want a commander-in-chief who has demonstrated an ability to lead. I think Trump has that potential over the next few months here if he rises to the occasion and the federal government gets its arms around this crisis. If he doesn't, then he won't win re-election. I think it's that simple, and it remains to be seen. You know, I hope as an American first, and obviously as a Republican, that he's able to do that. But we'll all find out together, I think.
Now, last question has to do with the stimulus package and the relief package. And there are two parts: relief for people who have lost money, businesses, jobs, and stimulus for the general economy. My advice to the Republicans is go big, go fast. See and raise whatever the Democrats send you, because you can't be on the wrong side of this debate. Do you agree or disagree?
100% agree. You know, I think at the end of the day, nobody in Washington can afford politically, let alone economically, to be the ones left holding the bag on this. Whatever the economy needs, it's incumbent on Congress, both parties, but especially Republicans, since they're the government, to pass it right away. And you're absolutely right, Hugh. There are a lot of sectors that are going to need a lot of help. I think starting with the travel tourism industry right away. I mean, they're already talking about airlines going bankrupt. You know, hotels obviously are really struggling. And you think about all the jobs and all the economic activity that depends on that sector. There needs to be a lot of help there. But then there's going to be sectors that we haven't even thought of yet. Manufacturers, if they have to start closing down factories. Ag producers, if they can't move their goods. Retailers, if they can't fill their shops, or there's no customers because everyone's at home in quarantine. The restaurant industry. I mean, basically no sector of the economy will be untouched by this. They're all going to need support to avoid massive layoffs. And we can rise to the occasion. Congress can rise to the occasion. But you're absolutely right. Republicans don't want to be the ones that end up blocking it.
Yep. Go far, go big, go fast. Alex Conant, Firehouse Strategies. Keep coming back. I appreciate political analysis from someone who's been there and done that. Let me also remind everyone, you need to get outside and walk around. You can social distance while you're getting your exercise. You can't go to a lot of the gyms in America. They're shut down. That's good. Gym employees are part of those people impacted. Personal trainers, et cetera. You might want to arrange for them to come see you at home. But whatever you do, take your relief factor. Keep moving. Keep working out. Keep doing it outside, inside, on your own. Develop your own routine, but don't overdo it. Don't underdo it. Just keep doing it. And that means keep relieffactor.com in your diet. We talk about sectors setting down, but a lot aren't. You're going to have better commutes than you had before for a few weeks, and that's okay. But what you really have to do is to make sure you stay healthy in the best way possible with exercise. Exercise and aging are inevitable. Relieffactor.com makes it a little bit better. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega, the 4 natural supplements that ought to be in everyone's diet. You can get it delivered at home. You don't have to go shopping for it. In fact, it's the best way to get it. Relieffactor.com. Wesbury joins me next from First Trust. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Joined now by Brian Wesbury of First Trust Portfolio, our go-to guy in times like 2008 and times like today. Good morning, Brian. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm doing very well.
How bad will it be, or will it be that bad?
Well, I mean, when you start closing, all restaurants, all schools, there is going to be a big hit to the economy in the second quarter. Now, how deep of a decline it's going to be? I mean, we could see a 5 or even a 10% drop in GDP for the second quarter. But if I look at Japan is opening schools again. South Korea is reporting fewer and fewer new cases every day. And so this thing looks like once you get a hold of it, within 3 or 4 weeks, things get back to normal. And so as of right now, we're forecasting a negative number in the second quarter, and it could be a big negative number, but then a really quick rebound in the third quarter. And there's two reasons I say that. Number one, we went into this in a really strong position. January and February, we were adding jobs, 270,000 a month. And so the first quarter was very strong before this hit. And then since then, now the Fed's pumping trillions of dollars in, cut interest rates to zero. The government is spending money. They're going to help people through the problems that they have, if your restaurant closes down. And so what it looks like to me is we rebound really quickly once this passes. And I'm not trying to play doctor, Hugh, and none of us really are, but we kind of know history. These things peak and then they go away.
So, Brian Wesbury, talk to the individual out there who's going to look at a market drop today. It'll be huge at the beginning. It could rally at the end. I always tell people, never sell into a panic. What do you tell your clients?
Yeah, well, remember, if you sell, then you got to buy at some point because, airlines earnings get hit. We know that there's some companies that won't be able to make up for this loss this year. But if you kind of think about it over a 5-year period of time, we survived, 9/11, the market went to new highs. 2008, and the market went to new highs. The market, corporate profits fell 46% in 2008. Right now, our U.S. stock market is pricing in a 50 to 80% decline in corporate profits. I think that's way too much. I don't think the economy will be hit that bad. And so you have to be right twice. If you sell now, then you have to get back in. And people go, well, I'll miss the first 10%. The problem is this market could rally 25% in 3 days. And you're going to keep waiting for the next drop. And so you never know when to get back in. And America is the strongest economy in the world. We rebound. That's what we do. We figure out a way. We get through it, and we come out stronger on the other side. And
what's your best piece of advice, Brian Wesbury, for the members of Congress who are driving into the Hill today and considering fiscal stimulus? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah, okay. Even though I don't like short-term things, we know that if government is deciding to close restaurants and businesses and not allow flights to happen, then I guess government's going to have to support those people that it's now put out of work. But that's not a long-term. I want Congress to think long-term. What can it do today to really power the economy forward once we come through this? I wish they would cut capital gains taxes. What if somebody has been forced to sell here, and let's say they owned a 401k for 15 years, they have a lot of profits in it. And so they're going to be forced to pay capital gains taxes. And so cut those tax rates.
What do you think, Brian, about allowing people to make tax-free withdrawals from tax-advantaged accounts?
Yeah, and at the same time, open them up. Let them put as much money as they can into their 401k, because this is when you want to buy stocks. And this will never get done, but I wish that our government would let us have individual accounts in Social Security so that we,
that won't get done. Yeah, that won't get done. But
think about it. It's like Social Security is buying a 10-year Treasury bond right now that's earning 0.5%.
Right.
And
it's just crazy.
At the same time, they can get stocks that are 30% cheaper than they were. And so stocks are going to outperform the 10-year Treasury over the next 10 years. I want to own stocks in any kind of retirement vehicle I have.
I agree. Open up the deposits for those who can deposit. Open up the withdrawals for those who must make withdrawals. It's their money, Congress. It's their money. Brian Wesbury, thank you. Follow him at Wesbury. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. Thanks again to Bob France. Kurt Schlichter did a great job last week. I'm glad to be back. Calm, focused, upbeat, with a bias towards good news. That's where you'll find fact-based reporting tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.